much of anything is bad, but too much of good whiskey is barely enough. Welcome back to Whiskey Mania. From smoky blends to sherry bombs to everything in between, the best Scotch whiskies bring ample flavor with every sip. Each one comes to us from the best Scotch whisky brands who respectively hail from a specific region in Scotland. For anyone just discovering this wonderful spirit, you are in for a genuine treat because there's no shortage of quality statements. And for all the seasoned sippers out there, surely you can always use it as a refresher. Now let's understand what is Scotch whisky. First and foremost, there's no such thing as Scotch whisky, which is with an E. So stop googling it. The term is Scotch whisky, that is without any, and that's never going to change. And what is Scotch whisky exactly? Well, we could wax poetic about the water of life and so on, but instead we'll stick to the basics. According to the official Scotch Whisky Regulations, which were most recently updated in 2009, genuine Scotch whisky must meet the following criteria. It must be produced at a distillery in Scotland from water and malted barley. Should any additional grains be added to the mash, they must be whole grains. The distillery must perform the following actions to all the grains: process them into a mash, convert them into a fermentable substrate exclusively by endogenous enzyme systems, ferment them by adding yeast only. The spirit must be initially distilled at an ABV, which is alcohol by volume, of no more than 94.8%. The spirit must be wholly matured in an excise warehouse in Scotland inside oak casks for a minimum of 3 years. No substance other than water and plain caramel coloring can be added to the spirit. The resulting statement must have an ABV of no less than 40%. The much shorter answer is Scotch whisky is whisky that's made in Scotland using water and malted barley and is aged for a minimum of 3 years inside oak casks. As stringent the Scotch Whisky Regulations requirements may seem, they still leave plenty of room for experimentation. For instance, Scotch whisky can be either chill filtered or non-chill filtered. Also, the type of cask in which the whisky is aged can vary, though the spirit is most often aged inside ex-bourbon barrels. After that, Scotch whisky can undergo additional maturation inside sherry casks, port casks, rum barrels, or whatever the distiller or the producer has in mind. Most of the time, you can find the type of information right there on the Scotch bottle's label. Previously, we have covered single malt Scotch whisky, blended Scotch whisky, Japanese whiskies, top selling Scotch whiskies, etc. But putting all that aside, Scotch whisky can be broken down into different categories. So now we are going to discuss different types of Scotch whiskies. Single malt. To qualify as single malt, the Scotch must be made from a mash of 100% malted barley and distilled at a single distillery by way of pot still distillation process. Single grain. Despite the name, single grain Scotch can incorporate other whole cereal grains into the mash. The whiskey must be distilled at a single distillery and it can be distilled continuously in continuous stills or column stills. Blended malt. Blended malt means a blend of single malt Scotch whiskies from at least 2 different distilleries. blended grain. A blend of single grain Scotch whiskies from at least 2 different distilleries. And the final type is blended Scotch. Blended Scotch means a blend of single malt and single grain Scotch whiskies. Out of all the Scotch whisky sold in the world, almost 90% of it is a blend. The most popular examples come to us from brands like Johnnie Walker, Chivas Regal, etc. When a blended whiskey carries an age statement, that statement pertains to the youngest whiskey in the blend. For example, Johnnie Walker Black Label 12-year-old consists of whiskey that's been aged for 12 years or more. So that was it. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe, and stay tuned for upcoming interesting videos. Thank you.